Today I'm talking about There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins and the 2021 Netflix adaptation. Hey there, I'm Jessica, and this is Bookshelf to Big Screen. If you're new to the channel, I take a look at books that have been adapted to the big or small screen and tell you what changed. So if you only watched the movie and don't want to look like a fool at book club, be sure to subscribe. The story follows Makani and her small group of friends as students from their high school are being terrorized by a serial killer. The killer seems to be targeting people with secrets, and it's a race against the clock to catch the killer because Makani has a big secret and she's worried she'll be next. Real quick, if you want to avoid any spoilers, sections with spoilers are marked in the description below, so you can just skip past them and watch the spoiler-free bits. The movie changed so much of the actual details from the book, and very little is the same. Here are the very few things that they kept. Makani's very best friends are a girl named Alex and a trans girl named Darby. Alex has a crush on a boy named Rodrigo, who ends up being the killer's third victim. Ollie, the boy Makani has a relationship with, takes her to the middle of a cornfield to simulate the feeling of being near the ocean, which is supposed to be kind of romantic because Makani is from Hawaii. Makani's grandma is a sleepwalker and has to leave Makani alone one night to do a sleep study. This ends up being the night that Makani is attacked by the killer. In the movie, in addition to Alex and Darby, Makani's friend group also includes Rodrigo, Alex's crush, and Zach, whose father is the richest man in town. After the first murder, they invite Caleb, a gay football player, to join their group. In the book, the group is only Alex and Darby. Rodrigo and Zach are friends, and there's only a couple of places where they're mentioned in the story. Caleb is an entirely different character. His family is the town's wealthiest family, and he's usually the one giving speeches at school. So in the movie, these characteristics were basically given to Zach and Macon, respectively. And the only kind of connection the group has with Caleb is that he's in band with Alex. In the movie, Makani has a secret relationship with Ollie. Alex suspects Ollie is the killer and Makani defends him but never reveals to her friends that she's involved with him. After Makani finds out that Ollie knows her big secret and is later attacked, she believes Ollie to be the killer too. After the fifth victim, Makani realizes Ollie is not the killer, and this is when he joins the friend group. In the book, Ollie and Makani hooked up in the summer before school and had sex once and then just kind of fell apart when school started. After the first murder, Makani sticks up for Ollie when some football players are harassing him. And he calls her later and they patch things up. The next day, he shows up to hang out with her, and from this point on, they are publicly dating, and he's a part of the friend group. Also, Ollie is required to meet Makani's grandma, and they get along well. The movie starts right off with the first victim. Jackson, a football star, is home alone and wakes up to things being a little out of place. In his closet, he finds a bunch of pictures showing him beating up another player, Caleb. The killer slices his Achilles heel and then stabs him. Afterwards, the whole town receives a video of Jackson beating Caleb. In the book, the circumstances are kind of similar, being home alone in the farmhouse and the little details like the egg timer, but that's really it. The victim is a girl named Haley, who is the star of the High School Musical. There's not really a description of the murder as it happens, but the next day at school, everyone is talking about it. Makani tells her friends that she heard Haley's throat was slit in 3 places, carved to look like a smiley face. In the movie, the second victim is Katie, who is secretly a terrible racist, which is extremely hypocritical because she presents herself as a loving and accepting Christian girl. The killer attacks her at church, ultimately hanging her while her racist podcast is playing loudly for everyone to hear. In the book, the second victim is a jock named Matt. He's attacked in the locker room, and his death is particularly gruesome. The killer stabs him and opens his skull and slashes his brains. This character is a little more like the Jackson character in the movie. It's important to note that Katie is in the book and she is a victim, but she's actually a very sweet girl who is legitimately nice to everyone, and she's the killer's sixth victim. In the movie, the third victim is Rodrigo. The killer attacks him at Zach's secret party right after he hooks up with Alex. The killer cuts his throat and leaves him in the fountain. In the book, Rodrigo is home alone playing video games and falls asleep. When he wakes up, all of the furniture is moved around. Having heard that the killer messes with his victims before killing them, Rodrigo texts his friends telling them what happened. He hears a phone beep and sees the killer standing right there. This is our first clue as to who the killer is. The killer stabs him, then cuts off his ears and puts them in his headphones and then places them back on his head. Later, Ollie tells Makani that the police discovered that Rodrigo was trolling people anonymously online and that the killer stayed and played Rodrigo's video game for 5 hours after killing him. In the movie, Makani is the fourth person the killer targets. She's home alone because her grandma has gone to do the sleep study. She locks herself in her room and goes to sleep. When she wakes up, she sees that someone has been in her room. She goes downstairs, sees that all the knives are gone, and when she tries to call for help, it only plays a recording of her voice. There's a fire in the living room, and photos of a badly burned girl are all over the wall. Then the killer attacks, tasing Makani and then attempting to burn her. But the killer is momentarily distracted by a car driving up, and Makani manages to knock him down. Alex runs in, and Makani tells her that it was Ollie, and then Alex gets a text with Makani's mugshot. Makani believed it was Ollie because they knew the killer had been using a taser, and she found one in Ollie's glove box earlier that day. In the book, Makani's grandma is at the sleep study, but Ollie comes home with Makani and they hook up. Later, Ollie is sleeping and Makani goes downstairs to get some water. She sees that things are out of place and realizes the killer is there, and finally understands that all the strange things that had been happening around her house had been the killer too, and not her sleepwalking grandmother. When she sees the killer, she screams and tries to get a knife, but the killer gets to it first and cuts her. Ollie runs downstairs, completely naked, and they all fight. At one point, Makani manages to pin down the killer and sees his face. Makani's grandma gets home, sees what's happening, and also tries to attack the killer, but she gets stabbed. The killer gets away, and Ollie calls the police, telling them the killer was David Ware. In the movie, after her attack, Makani is in the hospital and tells her friends what happened to her in Hawaii. During a hazing event, she was forced to drink and accidentally pushed her friend into a bonfire. The girl was badly burned, and Makani was charged and went to trial. She was acquitted but still got threats, so she took her mother's maiden name and went to live with her grandma. In the book, they're at the hospital, but that's because Grandma is there being treated for her stab wound. Makani does tell her friends, but it's Alex, Darby, and Ollie. There was a hazing event, but she was actually mad at Jasmine because Jasmine knew they were going to be hazed and didn't warn Makani. So the drunker Makani gets, the more mad she becomes at Jasmine, tricking her into having to take more shots. Eventually, she sees Jasmine go into the ocean, but she doesn't tell anyone. One of the other girls notices and they get to Jasmine before she drowns. In the movie, Caleb is the fifth victim. Makani runs into him in the school while she's running away from Ollie, who she still thinks is the killer, when Caleb is stabbed from behind. Makani is frozen with fear, and the killer puts the knife in her hand. Ollie tries to help Caleb and calls an ambulance. In the book, Caleb is also the fifth victim, But as I've mentioned before, he's an entirely different character. After leading a prayer at the town memorial for the victims, he's supposed to walk in the parade with the school band, but part of his uniform is missing. He goes into the grocery store to look for it, where David is waiting, and kills him. He cuts off Caleb's hands and lays them over his heart in a prayer position. Makani and Ollie are the ones who find him. In the movie, Makani realizes the killer is heading for the corn maze and the group heads there to save Zach, who says he's trying to find his dad. They split up. Darby and Alex lead some students out of the maze while Makani and Ollie go further into the maze. They come into a clearing where the killer is with Zach's dad. The killer stabs him and then reveals himself as Zach, saying they ruined the moment for him. Ollie tries to attack Zach, but gets stabbed instead. Zach monologues for a bit, saying that he just wanted to kill his dad, and when he found out about Makani's secret, he decided he'd put the blame on her and no one would know. But Ollie's not dead and finally manages to tase Zach, giving Makani the chance to stab him. In the book, David has been leading the cops on a wild goose chase. Ollie and Makani think Zach will be the next victim and are on their way to warn him when they find Caleb. Katie is the next victim. David had been hiding in her basement, and the worst part about her murder was that she didn't scream in order to save her younger siblings who were sleeping upstairs because David didn't know that they were home. David carves out her heart and sets it on a college brochure. Makani and her friends figure out that David is going after people who stand out, so they believe the next victim will be Rosemary, who just won an award for horse riding. They get to her just in time to save her, all of them fighting David, but Rosemary is hurt and Alex is killed. David reveals his motive was to prevent his victims from being able to leave town and that he had planned to turn himself in so that he could be the one to get out by way of prison. He then runs into the corn maze, followed by Ollie, Makani, and Darby. They fight, Darby gets cut, and Ollie gets stabbed. Darby manages to knock him out, and they're going to leave, but Makani believes David will just keep hurting people, so she goes back for the knife. David tries to attack her, but she stabs him in the back, killing him. I was a little disappointed by both the book and the movie. I think I was hoping for more suspense and I didn't really feel it. I liked that the movie didn't reveal the killer until the end, but I thought Zach's motive was kind of lame. I mean, he's just some spoiled rich kid who's mad at his dad. However, I did appreciate the fact that he was one of the inner circle of friends, which I think makes the reveal all the more shocking. Alternatively, I didn't like that the killer was revealed so early in the book and that he was a character that was barely mentioned a couple of times before that. What I did appreciate about David Ware as the killer was that his motive was more in line with someone who is a psychopath. At one point, he says it wasn't fun, it was just something that he had to do. Also, he thinks he's funny. The things he does to each victim, like leaving Kate's heart on the college brochure because she had her heart set on college. I also preferred the larger role that Ollie had in the book because I think the dynamic he had with Makani was important and we only see a little of it in the movie. Well, there you have it. That's my recap on There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins and the 2021 Netflix adaptation. I've included links to both the book and the movie in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. If you enjoyed this review, please click like and be sure to click subscribe to see my next video. Thanks for watching.